All right, everyone, welcome back. We'd love to dig into the details here. So today we're doing a deep dive into something super interesting.
Fascinating.
India's goal
Ambitious goal.
of reaching a
That's right.
$30 trillion economy
By 2047?
by 2047. That's right. Now, we've got a ton of really interesting articles and research that you all have sent over, and they all point to a pretty cool strategy that India is using to hit that goal.
Industrial clusters.
Industrial clusters. Now, if you're like me, you might not be super familiar with what those are exactly.
Right.
So that's what we're going to be unpacking today. What are they? How do they work? Why are they so important? And most importantly,
The exciting part.
yeah, what are some of the most exciting examples that we can find in India today?
Yeah, and it's not just about hitting this number, this 30 trillion. It's really about changing the very fabric of how their economy functions.
Okay,
It's a huge.
I love that. The very fabric.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's break it down. For anyone who's hearing this term maybe for the first time, what exactly I see as an industrial cluster?
I think the easiest way to think about it is like, imagine a bustling marketplace, right? Where all the vendors are kind of grouped together.
Yeah.
But instead of vendors, you have entire companies,
Oh, okay.
all related to the same industry.
Got
So
it.
you can think about it like Silicon Valley for tech,
So,
or, Detroit back in the day for automobiles.
right, it's okay.
And so what these clusters do is they create this really powerful network
Okay.
of businesses, suppliers, research institutions, all working in very close proximity.
And that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it's not just about them all being in the same place, though.
Right.
What are the actual advantages of this kind of a setup?
Yeah. So remember, I think you highlighted that graph, that really interesting graph that showed how much
Oh, yeah.
foreign direct investment, FDI, has been pouring into India. Well, a lot of that is actually driven by the advantages that these clusters are able to offer.
Okay.
And so I think it really boils down to three main things: efficiency, innovation, and cost effectiveness.
Makes sense. Now, the sources also mentioned things like economies of scale and shared resources. Can you sort of explain what that means exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. So economies of scale basically means that as these companies cluster together, they can produce goods much more efficiently
Okay.
and at much lower cost.
Right.
And they can do that because they're sharing infrastructure, they're sharing resources, they're even sharing talent.
So it becomes like this sort of snowball effect
Yeah,
where it just gets bigger and better.
exactly. And that makes them super competitive on a global scale.
Right. Okay, so now let's tie all of this back into this huge goal that India has of becoming a $30 trillion economy.
Yeah.
I think, the sources that we have today really paint this fascinating picture
Yeah,
of how that's going to play out.
absolutely. And I think it's all about driving growth and boosting exports, right?
Right.
And so, if you look at, for example, the pharmaceutical corridor in Gujarat,
Yeah.
this cluster alone exports 28% of India's pharmaceutical.
28% from one corridor.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And that makes India a vital, vital link in the global pharmaceutical supply chain, right?
Right.
This impacts, you as a consumer. You're going to have lower costs. You're going to have more options. It's a win-win.
This is incredible because, we're talking about things that actually affect people.
Yeah.
We're talking about medicine. We're talking
Yes.
about, the Surat diamond industry, which processes something like 90% of the world's diamonds.
It's insane.
It's insane.
It's mind-boggling.
Imagine telling your friends that you just learned that.
That's the kind of specialization
Yeah.
that makes India this global powerhouse.
Yeah, totally. Now it's not just about these massive
Right.
industries either. I mean, you sent over this article about the electric vehicle hub
Oh, in Tamil Nadu.
in Tamil Nadu. And that's a great example, right, of a cluster forming,
Perfect example.
but around this very cutting edge sector.
Totally.
And one thing that I think is interesting is, we've talked about how these clusters boost exports,
Right.
but they also really drive regional development too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the Chennai-Bengaluru Industrial Corridor seems to be a really good example of that.
Yeah, it's about spreading the wealth,
Right.
so to speak, right?
Exactly.
You're connecting smaller towns and villages, you're boosting infrastructure,
Hmm.
you're creating opportunities outside of those major cities.
And that's something that, we hear a lot about.
Yeah.
Is this idea that, it's not just about attracting these big multinational companies.
Right.
It's also about, supporting the micro, small and medium enterprises, MSMEs, which are
The backbone of the
kind
economy.
of backbone of the Indian economy.
Yeah.
And I think, Vedanta's new industrial parks, which we got some articles about,
Yeah, those are really cool.
they're really interesting. Those are a great example of how, they're focusing on these smaller businesses.
Absolutely. And it makes sure that they're not left behind in this
Right.
economic boom, right? So it's a much more inclusive model.
Yeah.
And what Vedanta is doing is they're setting up these parks for aluminum and zinc processing,
Right.
and they act as a nucleus.
Okay.
And it attracts ancillary industries, and then it
Okay.
creates this whole thriving ecosystem for MSMEs.
So it's like, the success of one company can sort of ripple outwards.
That's right. That's the network effect.
The network effect. That's a great way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's clear that, India positioning itself as a global manufacturing hub.
Absolutely.
But I'm curious what really stands out to you about all of this? What's the most compelling aspect?
I think for me, it's the ambition of it all,
Yeah.
right? Combined with,
Smart execution.
yeah, the smart execution, that's right. They're not just relying on cheap labor.
Yeah.
They're building these specialized clusters.
Yeah.
They're investing in technology. They're fostering innovation. It's really a long-term vision.
Right.
And it's really exciting to see it unfold.
It is exciting, and it does raise the question, what's next?
Right.
As India continues on this trajectory, what other, new and exciting opportunities might emerge?
That's the billion-dollar question, right?
It is the billion-dollar question.
I think keep an eye on sectors like renewable energy, electric vehicles, advanced manufacturing. I think India has the potential to become a global leader in these fields, and these clusters will be crucial for that.
That's a great thought to leave everyone with.
Yeah.
All right. That was our deep dive
Into industrial clusters.
into India's industrial cluster.
Just in India.
In India. It's a complex topic.
Yeah.
But hopefully we've given you a clearer picture
Of how they work.
of how they work and how India is using them
Right.
to really reach its economic ambitions.
It's goals.
Its goals. So be sure to check out the show notes
Yeah, all those great articles.
for links to all those great articles and research that we talked about today. And until next time,
See ya.
thanks for listening.